Hi, my Strangelings. Welcome to Mystic Mondays. Today we'll be dabbling into the movie tarot, the representation of actual tarot practices, and much, much more with a special guest. All right, so our special guest is Sapphire Sandalo, and I'm so happy to have you on here. We also saw the movie Tarot together, so
I know, I'm so excited to talk about this movie. I feel like I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, and I have a lot of thoughts.
yeah, definitely. I feel like there's so many things that I've now that I've had time to process it too. I'm like, oh my god, this came to me, this other stuff came to me. So before we get it started into Tarot, the movie, though, I want to kind of talk about a little bit your backstory and any paranormal experiences you had, and even your experiences with tarot. So let's start with your early life. Like, how did you get into all of this stuff?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I was just always really interested in learning about ghosts and the paranormal because of all of the stories that my family would tell me. I grew up in a Filipino household, and it seemed like everyone around me had different ghost experiences. Um, but I did have to sort of keep my interest in the more occulty kind of stuff on the down low because I also came from a Catholic family. So they kind of saw things like, Ouija boards, tarot cards, all that stuff was considered very evil. But I would just spend hours in the library, like in the parapsychology section, like reading like how to astral project and all that kind of stuff. And I do believe part of it was because I was trying to prove to myself that this stuff was real because I never had it similar experiences to what my family was experiencing. And so I feel like I've spent my entire life trying to prove these things to myself. And I am finally at a point where I'm like, oh, yeah, this is real for sure. Because now I have my own experiences.
Yeah, no, that's so important. I love that you brought up the whole Catholic thing because I know for us Latinos, we always say the Filipinos are our cousins.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was something that I also can resonate with too, because I think there's, my dad side of the family, my mom side of the family, and I know my mom side of the family, I always felt like they were more open to the metaphysical, whereas like my dad's side of the family, they're heavily traditional Catholic. And,
Mhm.
I have an uncle, which I love very much, but he has this bread and he's like, it's been blessed by a priest. It will never spoil or grow fungus. I'm like, isn't that
Ooh,
like
wait.
witchcraft?
Interesting. Wait, he
um,
still has his bread?
Yeah, it's an offering to my grandmother. It's like when
Oh,
you walk into the
wow.
living room and it's like an offering to her and he got it blessed by a priest. And then backstory, my cousin, his daughter, her husband was like, "Isn't that witchcraft?"
What'd he say?
Well, he didn't say it to my uncle because like we're
Oh.
all kind of like we love our uncle, but he's scary. Like we love him, but we don't want to challenge our this uncle. I love him very much though. Anyway, so going into that, I love that you talked about how like you've been trying to prove this experience, the paranormal. So, like, what's the most notable paranormal experience that you had?
Oh my gosh. I think the first truly unexplainable thing that happened to me was, I want to say in 20, when was that? 2011. And this is during a period of my time where I was not feeling particularly spiritual or religious at all. I feel like that's a chapter in a lot of people's lives, right? You go through a period of like, I don't think any of this is real. I just don't think about it. It's just not on your radar. Yeah, so there was like a short period of time where I was deep in that, and I think I told you the story. Um, I was just hired at a startup company, and I was being introduced to all the people at the company, and then we come upon this man, and the person, my friend, is introduced to me. He's like, "Oh, this is Elliot. You're going to be working closely with him." And then he swivels around in his chair, and then the second that I look at his face, I hear this clear voice in my head, and it says, "This man is going to be really important in your life." And it sounded like someone was talking to me. So I turned my head because I thought someone was talking to me. And I was like, that was weird. And then I just, don't really like think about it. And then now, oh God, we've how long ago is this? Then we got married in 2018, and now he's my husband. So that was the first time where something truly like caught my attention. Like, wait, what was that? But even in the moment, I didn't recognize it as something paranormal or supernatural. It wasn't until later.
I love that. Yeah, and yes, you're right, because I think that was, like, the first time when we had, like, lunch and we were discussing that, like, "Oh my god, we both have had, like, a premonition of our significant other before it became
Yeah.
it became
That's so cool. I love
Yeah.
it.
And I feel like most people would chalk that up as like, "Oh, it's probably, like, traction." I'm like, "No, no,
No.
like."
I mean, obviously, like, no shade to my husband, but it wasn't like, I don't know, like, it wasn't that. It was
Yeah.
different. It was like a thought, like someone saying it in my head. It wasn't like, "Oh my god, like, I'm so in love with this person." I mean, like, it was not that was not the feeling. It was just like a guy and then a thought.
I feel like you manifest things without realizing it. I don't know, do you realize that you manifest all this stuff?
Oh,
Like you're
yeah.
because I know another thing too, you said I asked you, "How did you know you're gonna be an animator?" Can you share that story? 'Cause
Okay, yeah, so that was the very first time that I made a vision board. So I'm all in on vision boards and that type of manifestation. Also, I am a very visual person, so
Yeah.
I do feel like vision boards work especially well when you are visual.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I did, so I had gone to school for animation, and it took me, let's see, I was maybe 3 years after graduating college, and I had been working art adjacent jobs. So, like graphic design, motion graphics, but it wasn't like animation, like narrative animation that I really wanted to do. And there was just like a day where I was like, I need to change this. Like something needs to change. And so I made my bedroom wall a vision board. I put all of these pictures up, and I took out my calendar, and let's see, how long did I give myself? I gave myself 2 months, and I picked a date 2 months from then, and I circled it. It was March 13th. And I circled it and I said, by this day, I'm going to be out of my job. I was working at like a fashion school at the time. I'm going to be out of that job and working in animation. So I circled it, marked it, whatever. And then I was still applying for jobs, and there was like a Craigslist post that was very, very vague and very sketch looking, but I applied to it and they got back to me, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, this is for a new Adult Swim show pilot and we'd love to have you." And I was like, "Oh my god." And then the day that I started that job was that day that I circled, which is like so nuts. It's so nuts.
Okay, let's pause because I'm trying to catch up. Okay, like, I swear to God, this is so important for anybody listening and even for myself, like, setting timelines, yes, it can be stressful, but sometimes that helps, like, really
Yes.
push this manifestation. I know that, like, Jim Carrey has done it,
Yeah.
Elvira did it, like, I think she said that if she wasn't gonna break it, I think by, like, 30 or something like that, she was just gonna quit altogether, and I
Oh,
think by, like,
wow.
30, all these series of events happened or something like that. So there's, like, people that, like, they set a timeline, I'm gonna quit Hollywood or I'm gonna quit doing this, and then it happens somehow.
Because you have to tell the universe, like, you have to give it a deadline.
Yeah.
And actually, speaking of that, though, so even though I circled that date, there was, I think maybe a week later, I remember looking at my calendar and second guessing myself. I was like, "Oh, that seems too soon. That seems too soon." So I crossed it out and I gave myself another month. And then at some point, I changed it back. And then when I got the job, I was like, that's so wild that the initial date that I circled was the date that it ended up being. But
I love that.
I always have to mention that part though, because we do have moments of doubt where we're like, wait, that's way too soon. But according to
Mhm.
who? Why was that? Why was 2 months too soon? Like, why? Why would I tell myself that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's this person I knew and they said that like so there's everyone manifests differently. I feel like you said visually is a great one, having a vision board. I've actually been doing manifestation through music.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and but there is somebody that said that they do this thing where like they ask, "Well, why not?" out loud into the universe.
Love it.
So like if they start to doubt themselves like, "Well, why can't I do this?" and then revert that and be like, "Well, why not?" Why not?
Yeah.
And just keep asking that question out loud, and eventually, like, that helps them manifest. So, anyway, but I love that so much. Talk a little bit how you went into, like, animation to now doing, like, a podcast and YouTube and all
Oh,
that stuff.
yeah, because it is kind of a weird leap. Well, let's see. I mean, I do feel like working in animation did lead me to my paranormal work now in a weird roundabout way. Because one of the last shows, let's see, so I worked as I was like a character designer and an animator for a couple TV series and commercials. Nothing really big or popular. But there was one show that I was working on called greatest party stories ever. And it was really cool. All these like 20 something year olds would be telling their craziest party story, and then we would animate their stories in different styles. And I was working on it, and I remember thinking, oh, this would be really cool if it was ghost stories instead, where we would like, film people but add animation to it. And so after I stopped working on that show, I had this period, this like 3-month period of unemployment. I fell into like a deep depression because I put way too much of my worth into my work, and I look back on that now. I'm like, that's absolutely insane. I have a better, healthier relationship with my work now, I think. But at the time, I was like, okay, well, if I have nothing to lose because I'm unemployed, what do I want to make? And I was like, I want to tell ghost stories. I've always loved ghost stories. I've always loved the paranormal, and I always loved animation. So how do I like combine these things? But then at the time, this is the second time I made a vision board. So I was unemployed, and I was like, okay, since again, nothing to lose, what would I want to be doing right now? And I was like, well, I really do enjoy doing on camera stuff. So let me like try to explore that and see how what I can do with that. And so I put that on my vision board. I went to this orientation for people who want to become hosts. And I never went I never went back because the orientation was I was like, oh, this is clearly not for me. It was very much for people who wanted to be like on Access Hollywood or like on the red carpets. And
Oh
I
my
was like,
god.
that's not my vibe. Yeah. But I'm so glad I went to this orientation because this is when I met. Oh, you know her, Rachel Evans. This is when I met Rachel, who was working at a YouTube channel called Snarled. And when we all introduced ourselves, I had mentioned that I was an animator and I was interested in talking about animated shows. And so she approached me after the orientation and was like, hey, I work for this channel. We're always looking for animators. And so I pitched that show idea of the ghost stories with the animation. And then, yeah, the rest is history. That was something scary.
I love that. Like, it's always, like, interesting how something that, like, may not even be something you really wanna do can bring other events and stuff like that. And I wanna
Yes.
say too, like, just a shout out to that because it's interesting, well, for me during 2020, I really got into scary animations through like, on YouTube. So I stumbled upon, like, a scary animation, and it was Mort that started it, and but then I
Mm.
ended up dabbling into other animations that were scary stories, but in animation form on YouTube. And I'm almost 1,000% positive I had to have stumbled on something scary at the time. But but it's so interesting because like when I stumbled upon it, I was like, oh my God, I've been wanting to do and I haven't it's like really back old 2020 TikTok. So if anyone wants to find it, they can. But one of my TikToks was on black and white animation and me telling the
Nice.
scary story about this guy finding something in the woods. And then fast forward, we ended up meeting through Something Scary Connection.
Yeah,
Uh, so it's
so
just
cool.
weird. Yeah, how like all of these like weird intertwining on that, right? But anyway, now that we talked about that, I feel like do you ever feel like your artwork, especially like when you draw or channeling like some creative passion, you get downloads, like intuitive downloads?
Ooh, I like that question. See, when I was younger, I was really obsessed with drawing eyes and characters with lots of eyes or characters that were just like one big eye. Or like if you look at everything that I drew, I still have like all of this artwork where it's just eyes are everywhere. Um, and I never really questioned it at the time. I was like, I don't know, I kind of like the shape of eyes. Like they just seem really like they're kind of nice to draw. I don't know, there's something about their shape and the way that they looked that I just loved. And then it wasn't until like a couple years ago where I learned about a Filipino Visayan goddess named Delika Mata, who is literally covered in eyes. And she is the goddess of clairvoyance and eyes and eye health.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I have a tattoo that's just a bunch of eyes. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I was channeling her this whole time. And like, I think my obsession with eyes was like a what's the word? predecessor, is that a word? You know what I'm talking about.
Predecessor?
Yeah, like, for my obsession with, like, psychic
Oh.
abilities and clairvoyance and stuff, so I feel like that's what the eyes were. It was like I've always been that person who's trying to, like, see the bigger picture and, like, always been obsessed with, like, seeing the future and, like, reading people, and I think part of it is because I come from a family where there were a lot of secrets, and I kinda and this is I'm sure you know this too, where, like, the way that you are as a child and the environment you're in, that definitely informs the things that you become interested in, especially with psychics, like, if you come from a place where you're seeing, discrepancies in what people are saying and then what you're feeling about the people, and you're like, "Wait, you're picking up on their energy and it's not matching, like, with what they're saying or what they're
Mhm.
doing." You know what I mean? I don't know if
Oh,
any of that
yeah,
made sense.
absolutely. No, it does. Yeah, yeah. So, because I feel I so I wanted to be an animator as a kid. Like, that was what I kept telling everybody when I was a kid. Like, I even did, like, little contests and stuff in school.
Oh.
Yeah, and then, like, when I went to college, I was like, I had a teacher that just kinda killed it for me, but anyway, but
Oh,
I won't
no.
yeah. Yeah, but the point of the matter, though, is that when I would draw, like, I never had to put a lot of thought into how my characters were gonna look on paper. I would just draw them, and they would come to life.
Mm.
And I just knew, and it's interesting because looking back on that now, it's like I really feel like drawing and art and all that really helped me with my intuition now, allowing the process to just unfold rather than be so stuck on like, well, what is this very linear lateral experience?
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to be an art teacher too, and I remember learning about that too, where it's like a lot of people don't trust themselves enough to allow the journey to teach them something. It's more of like,
Ooh.
"No, tell me how to do it." And,
Yes.
and I apply that with even now with my psychic circles of like, "Yeah, here we are, but I'm not gonna go on and on how I do it. I want you to feel it first, and then I can help you. We can have a discussion afterwards," or something like that. Um and all of this to say, when you were talking about the eyes and everything, I feel that that was something or somebody, and in this point, I don't know how to say her name. I'm so sorry.
That's
That
okay. Mhm.
the goddess to tell you like this is what you've always been. You've always known what your
Yeah.
calling is, and here you are today. I going into like tarot, right,
Mhm.
and artwork and all of this stuff, how it all plays
Mm.
together, right?
Mhm. Ooh.
I feel like in order to understand tarot, you have to really understand not only intuition, but the story that these illustrations are telling you. And so, what are your experiences with tarot? Like, how would you say, like, how do you use tarot or do you use other things as well?
Yes, oh, I love that. I love that tie-in. So tarot, let's see. I began learning about it, I want to say 2016, almost a decade ago. Um, it had always sort of been in the peripheral of my mind, but I never, sat down. I was like, okay, I'm going to start learning this until a podcast that I was listening to, a comedy podcast of all things, and somebody gave them a tarot reading. And the way that she explained it, if you flip a coin to just make a decision, it's not about what the result of the coin toss is, it's how you feel about that. And something clicked in me. I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, 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 yeah. I want to learn about how to do that." Um, and yeah, ever since then, I've been giving people readings and also readings for myself. I primarily use it for myself because it's truly the best way to just get an immediate response in your body. I like to collect all the different decks.
Same. I have like a whole
Right?
like tote of cards.
Yeah,
Like a whole tote.
I have a couple right here.
Yeah, like, I have a few of them too around me. I have, like, the traditional one and this one. I have, like, my
Nice.
oracle cards here and stuff. I feel like as like you were saying, we're very visual people and artistic people and people that love to draw as well. I'm sure, like, I find it therapeutic, so it's so
Yes.
so natural for me to, like, gravitate towards oracle cards and tarot cards, I feel like. And I feel like that's something that people don't talk enough about. I feel like a lot of people who are very visually artistic and love aesthetics, like, you're gonna be so drawn into tarot, and should really help, if anything, to really feel connected to the artwork and messaging of that. We did a paranormal psychic medium workshop a while back at the Wish House. What was your experience like using cards and channeling spirits and like channeling the energy of the house and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I only recently started using cards on investigations maybe in the last couple of years. It just wasn't something I thought to do. And every single time I have, it's been wild. Like I think also my personal relationship with the specific card deck that I use has like grown. Like I feel like there's a real connection now with these
I
cards.
love that.
Yeah, it's wild. And so, when we did the investigation at the Wish House, it was really cool having like a group of people all interpret the story of the cards together. And the number of times we would laugh because the cards were just so on point. Like just the stories that we were telling, it was really cool and it was really fun. Like I'd never done anything like that with like a group of people. Highly recommend. And it's also a really another reason why I love tarot is that it's such a it's a really great, I guess,
Mhm.
gateway into working with spirit. Especially for me as someone who didn't grow up physically seeing spirits or even seeing them in my mind's eye. I needed something like tarot to help me transition like into that space of like learning to trust myself. Like it's a good starting point, I feel
Oh,
like.
absolutely. In a way, you basically hosted your own mini seance with that too. I was in the other room and we're in darkness and with like the red light in there, and then we're using equipment. And like I feel like people use the equipment to also see it visually and to
Mhm.
get also confirmation and proof the same way as tarot. It's just that one is more like quote unquote tech and
Mm.
logical thinking, I suppose. Whereas like the tarot is allowing the visual representation and what you're feeling with that.
Mm.
Um
Mhm.
and so anyway, like, we were sitting there in the other room and, like, somebody would say like, I think there was a day that you were there where I was just cracking up, after I left, where I said, "Yeah, you know, the spirit of the house, she really likes men," and then there was this guy there, and he was, like, not conventionally attractive, I would say. I'll just say that because 'cause I'm not trying to be mean. Like, I'm not trying to be mean.
Okay.
Silence, and then I hear you guys in the background laughing. I'm like I was like, I was like, I was like, "Screw what I said." I didn't say I was like, "Hmm." It's like trolling, they're trolling. I feel like hauntings can be so funny, like, in a way.
Yes. I know, I wish that's what I want more people to understand, and that's also what makes me so upset about a lot of paranormal shows is that they lean so heavily into the scary when it's like, dude, spirit is so fucking funny sometimes. Like, we gotta show that.
Yeah, because that day I was like, "Oh," and, like, the minute I said it, I felt the spirit just like, "Shut the fuck up." And I was like, "Okay," and there was silence. I was like so it's just funny to me how that happens. Going into the movie, tarot, I do wanna talk a little bit about, like, just tarot, the origins of tarot, how
Mhm.
it's used, very briefly, because I feel like I could do an actual deep dive on this in a whole different podcast. So the origins in tarot are very uncertain. I don't know if you knew that,
Mm.
but there's just it's so much debate and controversy with tarot. I feel it used to be an early card game, so people draw this into Italy and how tarot were believed to be some type of game in Italy during the early 15th centuries. Earliest known decks were created for a playing game called Taroshi. Taroshi. I
Mm.
probably botched it up, you guys. I am not Italian, so I'm so sorry. It was similar to other trick-taking card games at the time.
Okay.
So there's this one deck, one of the oldest surviving tarot decks of that time is actually commissioned by one of the ruling families of Milan. These cards date back to the 1440s and are lavishly illustrated, and they do look like tarot. I looked at it. I'm like, "Oh, that does look like it."
Mm.
And there were 21 trump cards or taroshi were added, and they were kind of like a figure or symbolism of like the courtly household cards.
Mhm.
With like the fool starts at the bottom leading up to the emperor and the pope at the top. So the first trump card game appears to have originated in Germany though. So there's again just literally across Europe.
Mhm.
And anyway, so the development of the tarot started in the 18th century, where people began to using it as a divination tool rather than this like courtly game that was used in Europe. particularly in France. This guy named Antoine Court de Giblin, a Swiss clergyman and Freemason, published the Le Monde Permiti in 1781. Again, I'm not well versed in pronunciation in this, so I apologize. So, anyway, this guy then said that this he made a whole essay claiming that the tarot and the hidden knowledge behind it was from ancient Egypt. So now rather than Italy, people are saying that there's maybe origins in Egypt of it, which I can understand. I can actually see that actually. Um, and so they published a guide. So it was then Jean-Baptiste Alete, known as Itilia, was the first to publish a guide specifically for tarot divination in 1785. He
Okay.
also created one of the first decks designed explicitly for the occult purposes, which
Mm.
if you own like a Rider White deck, it says on the
Mhm.
back that like it has origins from Mason stuff, Golden Dawn,
Mhm.
and so, anyway, but again, we go back to like whether it started from Europe or maybe Egypt. Like we'll never know. It just there's. I feel like it's, in my opinion, the way I see it is like I feel like there's so many inspirations to tarot.
Yes.
Um, it's very obvious too, especially when you dive into the symbology of it and the fact
Mhm.
that like Freemasons might have had some help with it. Some historians suggest that tarot may have been influenced by earlier card games, as well as various symbolic and esoteric traditions. However, there's no definitive evidence to confirm these theories. That's why it's so
Mm.
uncertain about where tarot started.
Uh-huh.
And now we'll get into like, is tarot evil? How do you use tarot? And what are your thoughts? Have you ever heard anyone say tarot is evil?
Yes, my mom.
Oh.
Or maybe that was just Ouija boards because she watched The Exorcist. It's interesting to me the things that people deem evil because typically those things are quote unquote evil tend to be things that are just pointing out our subconscious or our shadow selves. Like we all have a shadow self. It's all the stuff that we're pushing down, we're ignoring, we're repressing, whatever. And that doesn't make us evil. But if you if you do not handle your shadow self or figure out how to healthily have a or if you don't figure out how to have a healthy relationship with your shadow self, then yes, that could manifest into something very dangerous. And I feel like whenever people are scared of tarot specifically, to me, that says that you're scared of hearing hard truths. Because when I first was starting tarot, I was bringing that deck everywhere. Every time, like, I would hang out with my friends at the bars, I would whip it out and be like, "All right, let me practice on you guys." Like, that was I was, so fucking annoying because I was just, like, so obsessed. And it was always really fascinating to me, the people who were like, I don't really want a reading." And then after they watch other people, they're like, okay." And then I would, like, give them a reading, and I wasn't really, like, that good, like, I was still just reading from the book and just being very, like I wasn't really trusting, like, gut intuition or anything at that point, but those tended to be the people who had the most that they were trying to hide, and then I would say certain things and they'd be like, "I don't wanna talk about it." So it's, like, really tarot isn't evil, tarot just points out things that you might be hiding from yourself.
Oh, I love that take. I really love that take. For context too, like the deck has 78 cards, so all of them have like symbolism. And it's so interesting because I know that people will say things like, oh, well, that's just like you're putting your bias or it's just randomized. And it's like, yeah, but there's
Mm,
78 cards. And
yeah.
somehow it picks the ones that really point out things that I couldn't have
Mhm,
possibly have known
mhm.
about you. So, but anyway, these 78 cards do tell a story. There's iconography in it, of course, like we said earlier. And this is really important too because as we continue kind of dissecting the movie Tarot, which we're about to get into, there's astrological meanings, there's elemental meanings to it. So I'll give you an example. Like fire, if you're like an Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, that's the fire signs, right? Cups in particular, right? Like the Ace of Cups or the Queen of Cups. Those are water signs, Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio. So like each little like house and card has some
Mhm.
astrological meanings to it. And some people can use it to interpret that, or they can literally look at the card and visually see like, oh, there's like, behind me, like the sun. That's great. The sun is good. We need it for vitality in life. Helps me have like a checklist of like, okay, I touched base on this, I touched base on that. Cool.
Mm,
Like
mhm.
rather than ramble on, because I could
Yeah.
ramble on in readings at times.
Uh-huh.
um, but anyway, I think that with that being said, the reader needs to set an intention with the cards. Like you need to have a clear headspace. I always like to do like a little like set my space, like some incense, do a prayer, and just clear my mind from like whatever's stressing me out, whatever happened 5 seconds ago. I'm like in that moment so I can like really clearly see the messaging that I need to hear or the person who is paying me
Yes.
wants to hear. So that's something that I feel like there needs to be some form of intention and ritual. Like you do the same thing. You're like we all do that, I feel like for the most
Mhm.
part, our own version of it at least. I think that's the same thing even with like Ouija boards and other divination tools as well. I want to get into like how tarot can be evil, quote unquote. Quote unquote.
Mm. Okay.
Um it's funny they mentioned bar. I don't know what that experience was like for you, but I recently did a reading on New Year's Eve.
Mm.
It was for someone's birthday slash New Year's, and they had a friend that no one really knew very well. They like kind of knew them, but not very well. And they were drinking. I don't really drink, and there somehow I was volunteered to do readings, and I was like, oh man, okay, fine, yeah, okay. So I ended up doing like think 2 or 3 readings, and I just cut it at 3 because like I don't want to spend someone's
It's
birthday
a
and New Year's Eve.
party!
Yeah, like, I'm
Yeah,
not
like,
trying to
why are you
um,
working?
exactly. So, I did think it was, like, the 3rd one.
Okay.
This person, I could tell they were drunk, but not, like, belligerent drunk, not I mean, that's for me, I didn't think that they were, like, really bad.
Yeah.
But anyway, apparently this person was adopted, and they were trying to acquire items from their past household or something like that. I did not know this, okay?
Mhm.
I was just doing the reading and they said, "Hey, I keep seeing like black and white images. They're kind of deteriorating. It's a symbology for things that are getting lost in the past if you don't dig deep into your roots and your ancestry." And I feel like there's this picture that keeps being emphasized. So I think it's actually a physical picture that you're searching for. She started crying. She lost it. She left her wallet there, okay?
Oh
She
my god.
left. She drove it wasn't even midnight, she left. I don't know what I said, but people were like, "What did you say to her?" Like, she's very shook, and I was like,
Whoa.
"I I don't know what I said," and Carl was with me because
Mhm.
me and Carl have been trying to do, like, joint readings together for people, so he was, like, kinda helping a little bit, but he really took a step back for this one. I feel like he told me, he's like, "I kinda felt like I needed to take a step back, but I was just
Mm.
there in case, like, anything." He saw it happen. He's like, "I don't know what he's like, "You didn't say anything." She just left. She was, like, crying. She, like, again, left her purse, left
Whoa.
everything there.
Mhm.
And so I truly believe that not only does a reader need to be in a clear headspace, so does
Mm.
the person receiving it because
Yes.
like you were saying, the shadow self, right? I don't know what
Mhm.
I said to her. I don't know if I tapped too far into a truth that she wasn't ready to hear.
Yes.
Uh, but she left. She booked it out of there. And I know now that someone who like her who doesn't understand readings, she's probably gonna be like hypothetically, right? She could take it as like, I had the worst reading of my life.
Right.
This was too creepy, blah, blah, blah. Good and evil is very black and white, and it's very subjective.
I feel like there's not enough emphasis on that. It's like she was clearly not in a space to receive anything. And so when you told her the like one thing that like triggered, her triggered her to leave, doesn't mean that it was I mean it was a spot on reading because you like, you triggered something. But that so it's a two-way thing, it requires both people to be in, like, a very, very good grounded space to, like, hear. Don't think I've had anything like that happen. It's typically people who are just not into it from the beginning, and so I will never force someone to and this is typically, like, family gatherings. I am that person who will bring my cards
I love
everywhere
that.
and, like, so everyone's like, "Give us a reading." And also just because 'cause I'm a socially awkward person, and it's, like, the best way to get to know people too, or, like, have just, like, some
Yes.
sort of tool to start a conversation and, also, like, help people in a way. But
Yeah.
no, I don't think I've had anyone, like, run away. I don't think.
I've had 2
Wow, 2? Stephanie?
in the last year. I
Damn,
was like,
dude,
"What the."
okay.
So, I think that's why, like, I'm really hard pressed for, like, I will never do readings for people that are under the influence of any
Mhm,
kind.
mhm.
I mean, my mentor used to tell me this all the time, but it really slapped me in the face for New Year's Eve. I was like, "Oh, yeah, that was a reminder, not doing this
Mhm.
again."
Mhm.
But let's segue now into the movie Tarot because I feel like we touched base on a lot of things, and I wanted people to hear all this stuff first, so they keep this in mind as we talk about the movie Tarot, and not just feel like we're complaining or at
Yes.
either we're complaining or hyping it up. We clearly have an understanding of tarot and use it. Before we get into this, uh, what were your expectations of the film? Like, what were you expecting?
So I had seen the trailer before we saw this movie, and I had seen some other tarot readers' reactions to the trailer,
Mm.
and to be honest, I don't I I saw it and I was like, "You know what? I'm sure it's just like a fun, silly horror movie, like, that's not supposed to be taken that seriously, so I'm not going to go in, like, wanting to be offended." I was like, "I'm just gonna go in expecting to have fun." And I think that did affect my experience. Because if I went in just trying to nitpick everything, I would've been very annoyed.
Oh my god, yes. I feel like a lot of times I have to try to turn that part of myself off when I watch
Yes.
films like this. 'Cause
Yeah,
talk to
yeah.
me. It's another comparison.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so for people who are watching or hearing this, I'm sorry. Well, you're probably watching it on Spotify because it'll be video on Spotify. But if you are watching this or listening to this, I'm gonna summarize the film and then we're gonna get into like what was presented, what my
Mhm.
thoughts were, what our thoughts were on this. This is gonna be somewhat of a spoiler alert, so be warned. I feel like it's been long enough now where you could have watched the movie. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's been long enough now. So, okay, so there's like about 6 friends that stay at this Airbnb and they find this stack of cards. I don't know if it was like a room or a basement. I don't remember
the
anymore, but
basement, I
the
believe.
basement. Okay. Already cabin in the woods. That was the first thing I noticed.
Yes.
Kind of like cabin in the woods feel. And, they get this feeling that they shouldn't use the tarot cards, and I believe Haley is, like, the female lead in this. Well, one of the leads, there were many leads, but she was, like, the quote, unquote, "one of the final girls." Again, I already said spoiler alert, so please
Sorry.
sorry. But she finds the tarot they find the tarot, and then, like, she explains, like, "Oh, I use tarot." And she does talk about how she's hesitant because you shouldn't ever use other people's decks. What's your thought on that? Like, do you believe in that? Or what are your thoughts on using other
Mm.
people's decks? Like
So all of these superstitions surrounding tarot, like when I was just starting to learn, I had heard all of these, but like the other one is you never buy your own. You should always like get it gifted. I don't personally super believe any of that because I've broken all these rules and I'm fine. But I think that these superstitions just stem from like, they stem from something else for another reason.
Mhm,
Like, it's just not recommended to use other people's decks because having your energy tied to a deck really helps a reading. So, like I had mentioned
mhm.
earlier, the very, very first deck that I bought, that's the one I use on investigations, and I feel like we have a really good relationship. So, it's not that, you're it's super, super bad to use someone's, it's just better to use one that you have a relationship with. That's how I feel.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I feel like I've broken some of the rules. I bought cards. I haven't been gifted one. And I strongly believe the energy as well, which is like I've used decks, but I like my own decks because I know them better. I built
Yeah.
the relationship with them better.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly for us to be a better reader more so than like a safety issue
Right.
personally. But of course, this film takes it as like, "Oh, it's like you should never, it's bad things will happen." thing. And, I'm a big proponent too that these films, any scary film is not only just like a commentary on society's fear,
Mhm.
um, also like it's just entertainment. I think entertainment
Yeah.
also is a great prerequisite to get interested in things too. So I'm also like what you were saying, I feel like people were making commentary about the film and saying things about it, but I was like, but I don't think there's nothing wrong with, like, making something entertaining to get people to wanna research into it. That's how at least I've learned a lot about a lot of things
Yeah.
through, like, "Oh, that seems outlandish. I wanna really read about whatever it is," right? Like Beetlejuice and Book of the Dead. I'm like, "Is there a Book of Dead?" And then I found out about Book of the Dead, and
Mhm.
so but not everyone's like that, and I get that.
Right.
Um, so anyway, the 6 friends, I think it was 6 friends, right? It was 3 guys, 3
Who
girls.
knows? Sure,
Yeah,
yes.
uh,
Details are murky for me because 'cause it's been a
they're
while
very mur
since I
it's been a
saw
minute.
it.
But, so there's 3 guys, 3 girls, like, at this Airbnb, and they all get a reading done. Haley does a reading on them. But she does this interesting spread where it's the card in the middle and I think 12 cards around it to represent the year
Yes.
to come. What's interesting is that she starts off what was that?
Oh, no, it's the 12 houses.
Oh, the 12 houses, yeah.
Mhm,
So she does like the card in the center and the 12 houses, which if people don't understand that, the 12 houses is a very specific thing for natal chart readings in astrology. So you kind of like, people make fun of pop culture astrology and it's like your sun sign, but there's more to astrology than there's just sun sign.
mhm.
And I think already the fact that we're having to explain this and the film didn't do that is the part
Yeah.
that gets me. Because
Yes.
of yeah, the film was so rushed that I don't remember the readings. I don't feel like they did a good job really explaining
Mhm,
all of this and why she
mhm,
chose to do it that way. Um, because everybody does readings very differently. I wanna say that the most popular types of readings is, like, the Celtic cross spread.
mm,
It's the one where it's, like, the center cards, and then you do it's literally looks like a cross, and then there's, like, 4 cards to the side of it. And then there's also the 3 cards, like past, present, and future. Those are the most popular spreads.
mhm.
Anyway, so then she does a reading for everybody, but she asks what their sun sign is, and then she, like, does a quick brief reading on that, and then she does the whole thing. And keep in mind too that the center card is the monster that comes to life because allegedly, like, whenever there's a curse on the deck of cards and the monster comes to life and chases after them, which to me, it's like, well, why is it here's the thing that I don't get. This is my analytical this is probably why I'm not fun at movies because I'm like, how would the monster know
Right.
that that's the one assigned? And how did like because again, everyone has so many different types of spreads.
Mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
if anything, I think it would have been creepier for them to be like, like a little instruction sheet of like, do this spread. And then they do it. And then that's how they summon the monsters. Like that would have made
Mm.
it more specifically to the curse and the witch's curse or whatever it was.
I
I don't
think,
know.
and I could be misremembering, I think the middle card represented the final outcome, and I think that's
Okay,
why
there we go.
it's because the monster is the final outcome for that person, I
Okay, there
think.
we go. Yeah, yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. Because again, murky water. It's been a minute, so I'm like, I don't remember anymore. But yeah,
Also
that's
not a very memorable movie.
if that says a lot about this review. Okay, so then they pull these cards, right? So the high priestess is pulled, the hangman is pulled, the hermit, the fool, magician, and death. However, there's two extra ones, the six of swords and the devil. Actually, no, the devil I think was pulled. No, it was yeah, it was pulled at the very end.
Mhm, mhm.
And so anyway, Lover Henderson, I love his artwork. I've used some of his artwork in some of my TikToks and short form content in the past to talk about internet lore. So I'm pretty well aware of his work. What about you? Are you aware of his work? What do you think of his stuff?
Oh my gosh, I mean, I never knew his name, but I'm familiar with, like, what he's done,
Mhm.
and I that was my favorite part of the movie were the monster designs, right? Like, you could really tell that there was so much love and care in these designs, and I told you this after the movie, like, I freaking loved that they had people in costumes, and it gave that early 2000s horror movie vibe because that's my era, like, I love movies from that time because there
Yes.
was less reliance on CG for monsters and just, like, people in freaking costumes, and, like, that's so
Yeah.
cool. I loved that. Yeah, they were all really creepy. That was definitely the highlight of the movie,
No,
were the
absolutely.
monsters.
Yeah, was the monsters. I loved yeah. And I think I asked the Sony rep at one of the events, like, "Hey, did is there a deck that are you guys gonna try to sell a deck?" They're not.
Oh, that would be so are you kidding? They could make so much money off of that.
I know, missed
Lost
opportunity.
opportunity.
But yeah, it's interesting that, like, I've never heard this. This is the first time I've heard where an artist that has such a name behind it, that people were really more excited about that than the actual storyline, which again just goes to show the quality of this film. Was it enjoyable? Yes, but there are just things that should not hold more weight than do you know what I mean? The story itself.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
Anyway, so what's interesting about this too is that this was a very much PG-13 film, and a lot of people were
Mhm.
saying that if this was a rated R film, they could have pushed it further. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, making it R doesn't make it a better movie. It doesn't make
Yeah.
the writing better.
Yeah.
Um, no, I don't know. I didn't feel like I thought the kills were still, like, kinda cute and clever, like,
Mhm.
I halfway through, once I understood what was happening, I'm like, "Oh, the card is killing them in the way that their tarot reading went out." Like, "Oh, that's cool." Like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, show me how they all die." Like, I don't know, I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
Um My issue actually was more with that opening sequence where what's her name? Haley or Kaylee?
Yeah, I
Haley?
think it's Haley. Wait, which the
Hale
opening?
the whoever was giving the tarot
Oh, Haley, I
readings.
think it was Haley, yeah.
So Haley, as she's reading people, I feel like the character development, if I feel like I didn't really understand who these people were, and then
Yes.
the readings that she was giving, it kinda first of all, there's so many people that she was reading. There was,
Mhm.
like, 6 of them, so it's kinda hard as a viewer to remember everything that she's saying, or I sort of, like, tuned out because I was like, "Whoa, she's saying a lot of words," and then, throughout the movie, you realize, oh, the things that she was saying then become true, but I
Mhm.
feel like it was a missed it could have been more memorable if the way that people died was more tied to who they were as characters, but I
Yeah.
feel like because who they were as characters wasn't really defined, then it was like
Yeah.
it all felt a little bit too random. I feel like that could have been really cool, but because it
Yes.
wasn't, it was a little bit forgettable. So I was like, "I see what they were going for," but
Yeah.
it didn't hit in the way that I think they wanted it to. That's just my
Yeah,
opinion.
same. Yeah, because I feel like you made a good point. There's so many characters, and I think it would have made more sense if they had less characters and really took the time to develop the
Focus.
storyline
Yes.
on that, rather than like you're Leo, so you're blah 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 blah. And even then, I felt like some of the stuff that she was saying about astrological signs, their sun signs, it wasn't
Mhm.
resonating from what I know of
Mhm.
astrology, even like pop culture astrology. I was like, huh, that doesn't make
Mhm.
sense to me, but
Mhm.
okay. I also feel like the film itself gave me very much like Cabin in the Woods, Final Destination vibes, the
Mhm.
more I sat
Mhm.
down and thought about it. And it definitely shows too, like this is a common trope that I felt like Talk to Me had, but I feel like Talk to Me
Mm.
was well better written in that
Mhm.
respect. Where it's like stupid teenagers doing stupid things and this leads to these consequences,
Yeah.
which falls into the trope of like don't play with the occult and
Right.
here are the consequences. And I just feel like it's interesting because like if they would have took the time to put in perspective, why does she get into tarot? How does she know about astrology? I think I
Mhm.
would have sympathized a lot more than be like, "Oh, they're just stupid teenagers. Okay, one by one, they're dying."
Yes. Yeah, true, and that's my biggest gripe with a lot of horror, and I know that like, I love a dumb horror movie, like, don't like, my favorite movie is 13 Ghosts, it is a stupid movie, okay? So, I'm not a fucking horror snob, but it does bother me sometimes when there's clearly not enough emphasis on making the characters likable enough,
Mhm.
where I care that they die, or if I care that anything happens, because then I'm
Yeah.
just, like, rooting for them all to die, which sometimes
Yeah.
is fun, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm like, I sometimes wanna care. I don't know.
So the film's connection between astrology and tarot feels so much forced that to me, if they would have just slapped astrology over tarot, it would have made more sense.
Yes.
I feel like that kinda killed it for me was the over forcing of it because then I couldn't just
Mhm.
like again, I know that we're both occultists and we both understand the metaphysical. We both can, we understand that. But I feel like it took me out of the film when they were like really focusing on the astrological stuff. I'm like,
There's a
okay.
reason, I think. This movie was based on a short film or a book, I can't remember. Short film or book? It was someone fact check that, called Horror Scope. So, like, it is about astrology first, I believe, and then I think they might have changed it or changed the title to tarot just because tarot, from a marketing standpoint is, like, trending more maybe? Even though I think astrology might be more popular than
I
tarot right
I
now.
think so, yeah.
But I here's the thing, so, I don't know about you, but personally, astrology has never really been something I really fully vibed with. I've never really used it in my own practice, and I know that there's overlap like, astrology sort of seeps its way into a lot of different practices, but I personally have just never really relied heavily on it, and a huge part of it is because of the pop cultureification of astrology where it just I don't know, it turned me off. I don't know, it's just been something I've never been that interested in, even though I was, like, a Sailor Moon girly, and I feel like there's similarities. Anyways, but
I love that you said
when
that.
so when tarot started and then she's doing this spread that I personally have never used. But again, I don't really do star charts or anything like that. I've done the 12 card thing for like a year, but not for the way that she was using it. And then as she was like, I don't know about you, but, like, the second she just started talking about all this astrology stuff, I was like, "Wait, wait, 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 is this movie tarot or is this movie astrology?" I was just, like, so confused, and then throughout the whole movie, they were just talking about astrology the whole time, and I was like, "Huh?" So I guess, like, for me, that was a little disappointing is I wanted to see a horror movie that was about tarot, you
Yes.
know? And there was so much astrology.
Yeah, it just felt so forced, and again, that I think that's the part that really took me out.
Mhm.
I've loved astrology since I was a kid, and Sailor Moon.
Mm.
When I was with, so one of the episodes on the podcast, we had an astrologist on here that we're friends with, and, I did mention, like, Sailor Moon is what got me into, like, the planetary
Ye
stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so but it's interesting because even in for me, like, when I do tarot and I've done tarot for other people, like, it does pop up once in a while, like, I'll be doing a
Mhm.
spread, and then, like, as I'm seeing some of these things, like, I'll give you an example. If I see a lot of cups, I'm like, "Ooh, it's they're really pointing
Mm.
out something about
Mm,
your
mhm.
personality, your ego, which is water." So I'll say something like, "Are you Pisces?" Because I see this card here. And actually, what's really creepy is that that happens a lot where I'll like see it and I'm like, "You're Pisces." Yeah. I'm like,
Ah.
I'm like, "Okay." Well, they're really pointing this out, and it's usually like a card about ego and balance and stuff like that.
Mm, mhm.
So, like, I think in that respect, it makes sense in readings, but, like, I
Yeah.
always I don't know how you feel, and this happened at the event, and this the tarot reader was so sweet, so
Mhm.
I'm not bashing him when I say this, I just mean I think he was good. I think there were some things he was saying that I'm like and I was overhearing other people there, but I'm not gonna say it on record. That I was like, "Yeah, they needed to hear that, but they don't wanna hear your message." Anyway, so yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I was like, "Okay, whatever." And anyway, like, he would say the sun sign first and then do the cut in the way the movie was, and
Mm.
I've been in other what was the other film that we oh, Haunting in Venice. They were supposed to do a seance, but they couldn't because like, it was loud. So, the way
Oh,
that the reader did it was that she asked everybody's sun sign, and then she would do a reading, then she would pull a card, and so I think for those are fun really carnival I don't mean to be mean when I say this, I really don't, but those are fun, like, carnival fortune-telling ways to do
yes.
a reading when
Yes.
you're doing quick on the go and you wanna have entertainment, but the reason why I say carnival is because, again, sun signs is so pop culture, and
Mhm.
if you lead with already knowing so much the specifics of how a person resonates with a sun sign, then that's not really channeling, that's you allowing that to lead the rest of the reading.
Mm, mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So and then in the film too, it does this whole thing of, like, the fortune telling aspect of tarot. Do you know the
Yeah.
difference or how would you say the difference is of fortune telling versus actually doing tarot readings?
So the way that the movie did it, it was very heavily focused on, like, what your future was going to be, like, very, very future focused, whereas the way that I personally do tarot, is very present focused. It's like, "Okay, what's happening right now?" And the potential for or your potential future, because the future like, the way that I always see it, the past, present, and future are all happening at once. Um,
Mhm.
the all in this present moment right now, and so that means you can change the future because it hasn't happened yet, but you know what I mean? Like, if you are standing on a road and you look ahead, you can kinda see, like, where you're going, where you can, like, change directions, and I think that, that also plays a part in why tarot or divination or fortune telling has always been kinda seen as this, like, forbidden thing, and it's only a bad thing when you treat it as that for sure is your concrete future because that can fuck you up, you know, because then it makes you feel like you have no control over your life or maybe you're like, "Oh, okay, well, that's gonna happen, so I'm just gonna, like, fuck around and do this or whatever," right? It sort of changes your whole perception on how your life is now going to be.
I feel like fortune telling is so much like your fate is set in stone. In the film
Yes.
and I can't remember, I think they try to dispel that in the film, but it's so, like, 3 words and then they move on, and it just feels like the way that the story is told is that it's like the fate is in the cards. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but not really, and I again, we go back to, like, how Talk to Me, it felt like, is there ever gonna be a conclusion? Can they have a happy ending? And that's what I would wanted with tarot. I would have wanted it
Mm.
to be like, because with the rules that tarot has, it could have been scary. It really could have
Mhm.
been, like, the idea of, like, yeah, your fate isn't set in stone,
Mhm.
let's try to, like, outsmart it, and then something bad still happens. Like, that would've made more sense to me than, like,
Mhm.
yeah, because I feel like in a way this film could have took it up a notch by actually having a specialist help write the script, like a tarot
Yeah.
specialist or a historian and a tarot specialist. Like that I feel like you could tell that this film really lacked that. Whereas like
Yeah.
going back to my friend Dylan, he has helped with Mayfair witches. And
Mhm.
he told me like something that he said was that he may be the specialist and he may be helping advocate for something in a script and they can take it or leave it because ultimately they
Right.
have to make it scary, but at least they now know from a specialist
Yeah.
how to add more gravity to that, and I just feel like this film would have took it up a notch in that way.
Right. Well, does it make you feel better that one of the writers had a reading before they wrote the movie and that's it? I before I hopped on here, I was Googling. I was just like, we're trying to remind myself about the movie because it hasn't been a while. And I saw this one article that was like, oh yeah, like they had like a reading like before they wrote it, but I was like, oh, just one of the writers had a reading, not both, just to be safe. And they're like joking about it, and I was like, wait, is that so? That's all the research I did, or
I rather see a horror film teach more about, like, how there's all these safety precautions and research that the person did and how it still went wrong because it still happens to a lot of us,
yes,
like,
yeah,
that would have made more sense.
yeah.
Um, but,
Well, okay, so to to the film's credit, they did do a couple things that I felt were definitely the right choice. Like, we talked about this after we watched it, like how
yeah.
they made it clear that it was this specific deck of
Mhm.
cards that was cursed. The fact that they use a specific deck, not tarot in general is evil. It's the fact they use this particular one that was cursed by this, what was she, an astrologist or something? Again with the astrology. Like, why not just make her a freaking tarot reader? Anyways, so yeah, like it was the specific curse deck. What was the other thing that we were like, "Oh, I'm glad they did it this way." I forget.
I think that was it. Sorry, sorry.
That's
I mean, I
that
didn't
was
watch it again.
actually it.
I mean, I wish I would've
Oh,
I don't know.
no.
I mean, I'd have to watch it to maybe get another, memory jog. But,
Right.
okay, so the other thing that just came to me too is, like, another thing is witchcraft and tarot. What
Mhm.
are like? Because I feel like a lot of people tie the 2 in. What are
Hmm.
your thoughts? Do you have to be a witch to do tarot?
No, I think that tarot is just a method of divination, and divination is used among a lot of different magical belief systems, and I don't
Mhm.
think it's tied to a particular one. I think tarot can kind of stand on its own, and it's a really good,
Mhm.
like I said, gateway drug into all this kind of stuff. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
and
That's
I
my
feel like
opinion.
yeah, no, you're right because, like, I feel like the way witch quote unquote witches, I still feel I don't know how to feel about that word, but in the
Yeah.
cult, like a practitioner of any kind who wants to use it in their magic or spellcraft or rituals, I think they use it, or well, I know they do, not think. I know that they use it as a form of like before doing this ritual or magic or spell work. Let me draw some cards in to see what the divine is telling me before I
Mhm.
proceed. I've also
Mhm.
been in the situation where when I worked at certain metaphysical shops and the person there is going to do a candle for them or a spell for them, they want me to be the reader first to kind of get understanding like where they
Mhm.
are in life and then converse with the person that's going to do the magic for them and let them know like, well, this is what the card said. Here's where I think you should do the spell work because I sometimes feel like people do spells, and this is another thing, spells or rituals out of like ego based rather than
Yes.
checking in with their divine self first.
Yes. And here's the thing, like, there's so much to be pulled from
Mhm.
that's is actually scary, like, with these things, like, that don't need to rely on the, like, stereotypes that we've heard. Like, it's not that, like, doing tarot is evil, it's that you can use it in a way that really fucks you up in the
Mhm.
end, you
Well, it's
know?
kinda like The Omen. Okay, so I went to go see The Omen,
I haven't seen it yet.
oh, man.
I
Okay,
heard
well,
it's
I'm not
really
gonna
good.
yeah, it was good, and but that's the thing, it's like, on the polarizing stuff of monotheistic or Abrahamic
Mhm.
religions is that we know so much about it, so it's easy to make a
Yes.
scary film from that and draw from that, and I just
Yes.
that's what I wanna see with the metaphysical. Like, why is that
Yeah.
that's not a big
Mhm.
ask, it's just to make it scarier.
Yeah. One
I'm sure,
day.
like Yeah. Like, I'm sure these people that write the like, The Exorcist or The Omen, like, these people grew up in a religious household, so they know how to draw from what's scary from that, and I
Right.
think that's why like, it's not that we're complaining, it's more of, like, just
Yeah.
really putting in that parallel of, like, "No, these films are scary for a reason," even though I don't think The Exorcist is not as scary the first one was, but, like, the newer ones are not scary because
No.
we go back to what I just said, they pull from, like, "Oh, she got possessed because she used a pendulum." Are you kidding me?
Wait a minute, who wait, Pendulum in the very first Exorcist?
No, the most recent one of the most recent ones. Like, she
Wait,
used
that's oh my god, I can't even. Like, get the fuck outta here. Like, what?
I just feel like I
Yeah.
think would a teenager probably enjoy it? Sure, like, they would probably
Right.
find entertainment and all of that, and I only say teenagers because they're probably not, like, into it the way we are is what I'm saying, like, I'm
Mm,
not trying to
mhm.
bash people with that. Either, like, somebody that's a teenager because it's PG-13 film, I think they would enjoy
Mhm.
it. I think that if you're somebody that doesn't know about the occults, you'll probably enjoy it for what we mentioned, like the artwork, and some people
Yeah.
like the fast pace to it. I didn't because, again,
Oh.
I wanted more of the fear
Mm.
factor.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And anticipation. Also, sorry, I know I'm not trying to drag this out for too long. I'll say this final thought before we do a recap of everything or conclusion to everything. I don't okay, Paxton.
Who's
Paxton's
Paxton?
Paxton was the character in the film Tarot.
Like, Batalon.
He's Filipino, you're Filipino, I told you. But yeah,
Mhm.
Jacob so his character was Paxton. So
Uh-huh.
Jacob Batalon, yeah, Jacob Batalon's character was Paxton in the film Tarot. I loved his character, but I feel
Mhm.
like it's 2024, we should not be making stupid decisions. Like, it drove me insane. So, again, spoiler
Yeah.
alert. So, Jacob's character, he pulled a fool card. Yeah, it was a fool
Mm.
because he was in the elevator. He pulled a fool
Yeah.
card, and it was something along the lines of, like, "Oh, you shouldn't be locked in your home, and you shouldn't be locked in closed spaces." And so, he was literally, like, one of the top 4 or 3 finalists of the survivors.
Yeah.
So, he's literally starts getting stubborn because I think he's a Taurus in the film. So they're like, "Oh, you're a Taurus, you're stubborn, and not be in close spaces." So what does he do towards the end after everyone dies? He's like, "I'm gonna go home and do exactly just that." And I'm like,
Right, right. It's like,
"That took
okay.
me 2024.
Mhm.
This is not what should happen." However, I like the plot twist at the end. I did enjoy that, but yeah, I feel like they could have done more with that storyline in particular.
Yeah, I feel like, this movie probably could have used, like, maybe another draft or 2, is how I feel. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
this was, like, a first here's the thing, making movies is hard.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
I fully understand that, and I really don't like it when people just, like, shit on people who've never made a movie in their life, like, shit on things.
Mhm.
So it's like, I fully understand that, like, I don't know, things happen. There's probably reasons why this movie wasn't as good as it could have been. However, like, I think I don't know, we're allowed to at least just, like, express how tarot is represented in this movie.
Making movies is hard. I've never made a film. I mean, I only have written scripts for, like, the YouTube side of things and stuff like that and my content. So I get it. Sometimes we wanna make it interesting and we wanna have, like, a good cohesive storyline that makes it entertaining and fulfills the conclusion that we envision in our mind's eye, right? But the thing about it is that I feel like, what we're trying to say is that earlier with, like, comparing, like, very religious, scary films to even
Mhm.
films in the occult, like, there's clearly so much work that needs to be done for the occults, and especially with, like, the online space, TikTok has proven that people love witch talk, people love
Yeah.
astrology, and I just feel like it's time to really change the narrative of, like, we have
Yes.
so many people that are ready to tell these stories and give them a good perspective on it,
Yeah.
and with Mayfair Witches as an example, some of these production companies are hiring specialists to gain perspective, and I just feel like, if they could do that, then this film would have been so much better to finally have had a specialist to do tarot and, like, make it more
Yes.
interesting and add the gravity of that, especially since you said, like, they had horse and in the original concept, they wanted it to be astrology based. They could have then finally hired astrologist, a tarot reader to help them bring that, pivot from astrology and get into tarot in a very smooth, succinct way, because it really felt very much choppy in some aspects of
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yeah.
there's potential there, and there and it's entertaining, like I said, I think for non-people that know about this stuff, it's gonna
Mhm.
be very entertaining, and it showed the after party when we went to see the screening, people enjoyed it, so it's not a bad film, it's just
No, it's
this is the
fun.
part yeah, the part where it could've been better, yeah.
Right. And I do think like there because there is so much or there's so many gates that have to be passed in order for like a movie to even be made. I can see why it's hard to do something that is truly genuine when it comes to these metaphysical topics because you have to convince these CEOs who probably most likely don't know a fucking thing about any of this and you
Yeah.
have to convince them that like, "No, this is scary, this is cool." So it's like, what's gonna appeal to them, you know? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, for sure, and I really guys, when I say this, like and you just said it too, like, I can't emphasize that some of these people with money that are in entertainment space don't know crap about what they're funding for, and they
Yes.
hire people to, like, help them get excited about it, but even then, it's so much convincing. It's like, "Then why are
Yes.
you doing scary films if you don't like scary films?"
Right? I'll never understand. What would you rate this movie out of 5?
It's so funny, I was actually about to ask you that.
Oh my gosh.
Um, okay, so in conclusion, I would say based on everything I said, I know I, like, did a lot of bashing. I would give this a solid 6,
Of
10.
oh, 10. Okay, I think. Out of 10, I would give it I'd say 4.
Oh, I think I gave it a 6 only because when we were in the theater, so many people did react. I know I jumped a few times, so I'm like, "Okay, it got me to jump. I'm chill."
Yeah, yeah, it
Um,
had some, like, cute little scares, good kills, good monsters,
yeah, the
the art
design.
yeah,
Mhm.
the art was cool, um, would I ever watch it again? I don't think so.
Yeah, we surely did not for this, so
Yeah, but was it the worst thing I've ever seen? No.
no. No, I mean, like, Talk to Me okay, so, like, it's so funny because I actually walked out of Talk to Me.
Get
Uh,
out, really?
yes, and I liked it better than this, that's the funny part,
Wait.
so this is what happened. I know, right? So what had happened is so we were at the theater and I was getting it made me feel intense triggerness of like just getting pissed. But pissed for like
Oh,
for the storyline, not at the actual like people or anything. It was more like, oh, these fucking teenagers. But
yeah.
then I started getting like anxiety for them. So I was feeling all kinds of emotions. I went from feeling sad to anger to anxiety for the characters. And then like at one point I kept feeling like the film made me I don't know if it made me feel this way or what, but then, like, during me feeling all these intense emotions, I was like, "Something weird is gonna happen in this theater. I just feel it. I just feel it."
Okay.
And then as soon as I said that, the lights turned off, the film just cut through, like, it just stopped,
What?
and the lights turned on, and everyone started, like, gasping, like, "Is that what's going
Is this,
on?"
like, part of it?
Yeah, everyone was so confused, and then I got up, and so did other people to go, like, talk to a staff member, and they're like, "Yeah, that's weird that that happened, like, I don't know what happened, so we're gonna go check to see what happened," and I was like, "Okay, this is a sign for me to get out of the theater," because maybe I was just feeling such intense feelings,
Hmm.
and you know how they sometimes say that, like, films can manifest things for people or, like, stuff
Mm.
to happen? So, part of me is like, was I feeling so intense that we all just manifested something to
That
happen on
you stopped the movie
not
because
me, but, like, all of us because 'cause we're all feeling emotions in it, you know what I mean?
interesting.
I don't know,
Interesting. But
but
here
that's never happened to me.
that is wild, but also a testament to, like, how good that movie is.
Yes.
Because for you to feel, like, so you're invested in the story, and,
Mhm.
like, that's all we ever want is, like, we wanna feel invested in these stories that we're seeing.
Yeah. Because like I was saying earlier, like, this film, Tarot, is just, like, a trope of stupid teenagers doing stupid things, and so is Talk to Me, but in Talk to Me, I was so invested, like, "She did this, oh my gosh, she did that," and then something told me, like, "You need to get out of the theater. You need to go," and then the lights turned on, everything
That's
went white, and I was like,
wild.
"Okay, I'm leaving," and we left.
Wait, did you ever finish the movie?
No, but my our friend Sabina told us the end or told me the ending. Um,
Wild.
so I was like, "Okay," I mean, I'll watch it again, but yeah, I just felt so invested, and I was like, maybe, like I don't think it was just me doing it, I think all of us in the theater were feeling certain things about it.
Interesting.
and then that's what happened. That's what I think. That's what I think, but I might be delulu, I might be reaching, but you know what? That's what I think. Alright, well, we'll wrap it up here. I know we went a little over time, but I thank you so much for being on this podcast and talking about tarot, and I hope people enjoyed our deep dive on this. Where can people find you?
Ooh, well, thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah.
I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Sapphire Sandalo. I have a podcast called Stories with Sapphire. You can listen wherever you listen to podcasts. I have an Instagram, not super active on it anymore, but it's Sapphire_Sandalo. Sapphire with two
Yay!
P's.
Oh, yes, yes. Just see the screen if you're on Spotify.
Oh,
Sapphire
yes, it's right here.
right
Yeah,
there.
two P's.
Alright, well, thank you so much, and remember, guys, stay
Stay
strange.
strange.
Woo!